Well, if you don't know what fair is, you can't make it. Unacceptable by any reason.
Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9PBS.
Welcome back to another Donnybrook. Good to have you with us. Thanks for joining us, and no shortage of hot topics this cold week. We'll get to them after we meet the panelists, starting with the media veteran herself, Wendy Wiese, along with Mr. Bill McClellan from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Also from the Post and STLtoday.com, Joe Holleman, and Alvin Reid joining us from the St. Louis American. Okay, I want to ask you, Wendy Wiese, about, well, he actually is maybe the most famous St. Louisan, Nelly. He's sold 21 million records right now. He's sold more records than all but 3 rap artists. He's on the St. Louis Walk of Fame. He performed this week for President Donald Trump's inauguration at the Liberty Ball. And he got a lot of flack, and this became a national story from Variety to Fox News and beyond. Should Nelly be performing at an event that honors Donald Trump? What was your opinion?
I probably should recuse myself because his daughter and our daughter played basketball at the Matthews Dickey Boys
I'll be darned.
Club. Mm-hmm. Together. They were on the same team. I never met him. And I was back when he was touring, but he has every right to do whatever he wants. And I think that election, if you believe the pundits, was a rejection of the idea of identity politics. And everybody has to think the same. We cut across all kinds of lines, and you're expected to think the same as we. I mean, and I think that the point that he made, or the point that his spokesperson made, was that it's an honor to be asked by the President of the United States to do anything. He said, members of the military do not have, they have no control over whether or not they're serving under this president or that president. He felt very much like he was called to serve his country, and that was why he did it. And I think he is entitled to do that.
All right, a couple things. One, I'm tired of people when in trouble running to the military. Okay, right? Support the troops, whatever. Whatever it is, it's like that's not sincere. I'm sorry, Nelly. I don't think that's an actual deal. But Nelly, the night that you're performing for the president earlier in the day, Nelly, you stand on stage in Harris-Stowe and talk about the importance of African-American education. Well, he's gotten all the DEI programs, could care less about, African-American education. He's bound and determined, and his administration, to basically gut some of the civil rights programs that actually our, relatives died for at one time. So, you got to pick and choose your spots. You got every right to be there, but at the same time, I took that personally. I think I was very disappointed in him. And as someone mentioned to me, he said, well, I guess somebody's got to dance in the mansion so the rest of us don't get beat tonight. So,
Well, don't forget, Nelly was born on an Air Force base. His dad was military, his aunt was military, his uncle's military, so maybe he
But when's the last time you heard Nelly say anything about the military?
Well, I don't follow him that carefully, but I do remember when the Beach Boys were playing for Ronald Reagan and people got upset with that. And, I just think that music is, and he's great at it, he's a civic treasure. It bridges the gap between people with different points of view.
I agree with you.
And it should be, he's got this talent, it should be shared.
This is just a totally different situation. And I don't think Black America made this a totally different situation. I think the president did. But so everybody's got to make their choices.
And he did say that, he wasn't necessarily supporting the president, but he would have performed for Joe Biden or Kamala Harris or anyone who wanted to.
Elvis Presley was a big fan of Richard Nixon. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And, to a lot of Elvis Presley people, that was a little bit of a contradiction.
I think, it comes down to, I think what everybody has said is absolutely right. Nelly has a right to perform for whoever he chooses to perform for, and people then have the right to think of Nelly whatever they want to think about him for his choice.
That's right. Just
Okay, Bill McClellan, I want to ask you about Dennis Hancock, who's a member of the St. Louis County Council, and the previous prosecuting attorney for St. Louis County actually charged him with violating the state constitution because he hired his daughter-in-law, Holly Galati. As soon as he found out... Stepdaughter, that's correct. Thank you very much. So he hires this relative, and according to then prosecutor Wesley Bell, it's against the state constitution. But Dennis Hancock said, I didn't know about this. I didn't know about this aspect of the state constitution that barred nepotism. Well, your colleague Tony Messenger dug up some emails from 7 years ago where one Dennis Hancock, the former mayor of Fenton, was complaining that a member of the Board of Aldermen there, Joe Maroth, had voted for his niece's husband to be on that city's planning and zoning board. And he complained, Hancock did, that this was nepotism and that Maroth had to step down. Is it possible that Dennis Hancock forgot the state's nepotism law?
Well, I don't know what he's forgotten, but I would like to say about me, I was wrong. Because when we talked about this before, I said, who reads the state constitution? It was my attitude, and I don't think this is a big deal. And I stood up for Dennis Hancock, and I read Tony's column, and I thought, if this guy made a big deal about the nepotism law, he knew. So I was wrong. Now, whether or not Mr. Hancock forgot, I don't know, but I was totally wrong on it. And in fact, I sent Tony an email right after I read his comment and said, I'm wrong.
And you were so wonderful about it because Alvin and I were standing up here on Mount Righteousness. We were saying that he was wrong to do this and wrong. And you stood there and you were wearing your cape of the Church of the Second Chance. And you were talking about this is pro-family. This guy's just trying to be a good stepdad. And why? And I thought, I was laughing. I'm like everybody else on the panel. I was laughing through the whole column.
All right.
Because he did go into such detail.
But sometimes men forget. They forget anniversaries. They forget a lot of things.
No, Charlie. He went into such great detail about the Constitution.
That's right. That was the part.
The Constitution, because that was the point about
Wesley Bell. You're talking 7 years ago we did that, yeah. All right, well, if this Constitution is so sacred, then why didn't Joe Maroth lose his job in Fenton? No one took any action, including the county circuit attorney or the prosecuting attorney.
Because Tony Messenger didn't look into it.
And how about Dr. Kanika Cunningham, whose daughter was hired under her watch in the health department.
Okay, but you're throwing out, we're talking about Dennis Hancock and the situation that was. And
that's right.
Quite frankly, he said I didn't know, blah, blah, blah. And he knew, which means, okay, dude, you fibbed, okay? And you got busted.
And I still
now, where are we going?
Well, here's where we go. And this was always my contention from the beginning. It was not that someone was trying to remove Dennis Hancock from office. I never said he shouldn't be. What it was they were wanting to do it very quickly for what I believed and a lot of political observers believed were for purely political purposes. It had nothing to do with good government. And they were trying to get him out very quickly for political reasons. And they were trying to do it without giving him a hearing in court. All his attorney said was, you want to throw him out, he gets due process. That's all.
Now that it looks like he knew about it 7 years ago anyway, do you think the current prosecuting attorney is going to try and get him out of there, or is she going to give him some sort of diversion program?
Let me answer. I think that Hancock should just resign and then run again. I mean, like Sharon Carpenter did in the city.
So should Dr. Kanika Cunningham also resign?
Wait,
her daughter is...
If the council calls her before and says hey, look, you got to resign or whatever, then we'll have that argument. But you're saying look at the left hand and the right hand's over here lying. Okay, we're not talking about
right.
I think what he's talking about is the equal application of a law.
Well, but what I'm saying is that all right,
let's not go there. Let her
go down to the council, say she didn't know or I've never read the Constitution, and her to get busted on some memo or email that she didn't know.
And like with Kim Gardner, when they filed a quo warranto against her, she was going to have a day in court. That was all
we're not-
Dennis Hancock's attorney was
No,
asking
he was
for.
saying that there was nothing to see,
Right.
that I just didn't know about it, and I think this is kind of another email reminder, boys and girls.
They might come back.
They might come back.
Very
yeah.
well.
Yeah.
All right. And hats off to Tony Messenger for unearthing these
Great
emails.
column.
Joe, I want to ask you about a topic that we broach pretty often, and that's police officers, public safety, City of St. Louis. There's been some major developments this week. One was that the police officers in the city will get a raise. They're going to be up to, what, $56,000 a year, although in Clayton, the starting salary is now $73,000 for a police officer. In Ladue, it's $74,000. So St. Louis is still far behind. The mayor also announced that those vacant positions are going to be cut. And we used to be at 1,300, now it was 1,200. Now we're going to be down to about 1,100 police officers in the city of St. Louis if we achieve full enrollment. In 1995, it was 1,600. But the mayor went to Jeff City along with the chief of police, and she argued that control of that police department should remain with the city of St. Louis and not be taken over by the governor and the state. What do you think is going to happen in this case?
I don't think she'll be successful. For one, I believe she needed to give some raises. There's an election coming up, and by denying police officers raises would be just a horrible way to lead into an election. I think regardless of their pleas, when you have the governor of the state and the majority of St. Louis area legislators saying the state needs to take it over, and then you have the police organizations on top of that saying the state needs to take this over, I don't think, however you want to judge what she did up there, I don't think it's going to be nearly enough.
Well, I mean, it's you get elected and you say, I'm going to address the crime problem, which she did, okay, and they're want to say, like, well, I don't believe the statistics. Well, murder is murder, and a dead person's a dead person.
Yeah.
So I think you can believe that one.
I do.
But,
I agree.
all right. But all in all, I mean, we've said it before, I think it's a terrible time. I think the state really doesn't really want control of the police department. They just want to just mess with St. Louis. And I thought that just, as far as the number of police officers, I thought the police chief, as he told them, he said, like, well, there'll be more police officers as the state takes control. And the chief said, like, there's no buses out there lined up with people that want to be police officers, and that's not going to change. So, I mean, you could put forth your best argument. But Joe, I agree with you. I think that basically with the governor and a bunch of legislators that could care less about St. Louis, could care less about the fact that the state runs Kansas City's police department and crime's really out of control over there.
Well, no, hang on a moment.
They're ignoring all that.
I don't think Kansas City crime is as out of control as St. Louis. I mean, for example...
No, the crime rate is higher in Kansas City than it is in St. Louis.
No, it's actually lower in the homicide rate. They have fewer homicides, 147 this past year, and they have 130,000 more people. They have 530,000 people, they have 530,000 people in the city.
The overall crime rate is higher. Now, once again...
Not homicide.
Well, okay, but you don't believe the homicide statistic in St. Louis, but you believe the one in Kansas City.
Well, you know why I don't in St. Louis? A couple of things. First of all, the population in St. Louis is going down.
Right.
So you should have less crime. Right. But also, if you go from 1,600 officers to 800, which we have right now, that's fewer crime reports written. Right. And we're talking about reported crime, not crime that happens. But a lot of crimes don't even get a police report because, people...
I think the most important thing to look at, and as far as citizens are concerned, is what do the police want? And since the police association is very clear, they prefer state control over
Both
local
police
politicians.
associations,
And the ethical society, the black officers say, we would rather have a board of police commissioners than the mayor and the board of aldermen.
Okay, I just don't think...
in terms of the homicides, isn't the difference from year to year, isn't it 10? I mean, I know that that's important for the 10
If
people
you're talking
who are
gross
still
number,
above
total
ground.
homicides.
Right.
Right.
The difference is 10. I don't think that's anything to celebrate.
Well, 10 years from now, if you reduced it by 10 years from now, you would have a very low rate. I'm not saying that would happen, but I'm not going to eschew the 10. By the way, when you said the number of police officers, it's like in pro sports. The average number salary-wise, the lowest is for football because there's more people. The reason Kirkwood or Ladue, some of these other places have higher police salaries is because they have less police officers. Okay, that goes into the mathematical formula.
Well, I think look at it, and I want to say something. When you talk, I try to avoid discussions about crime stats because there has been a notorious history on both sides of skewing stats to show what you want it to show. But I will say this, total number of homicides requires a whole bunch of other information, and you pointed it out exactly, as the Police Officers Association did in Jefferson City. The city has lost 40,000 people in the last 10 years. One would assume the rate would go down, but it's all about rate compared to your population. If you lose 40,000 people, saying you reduce the homicides by 10 may not be that big of an improvement.
I actually agree with Alvin that homicide is the one stat that's pretty trustable.
Well,
because it's a dead body or it's not a dead body.
Well,
right?
there's a lot. No, but there's a lot of things. I remember going back in the 90s when we were setting the records, and the police chief back then said, Robert Sheets, if everybody remembers Bob Sheets, he said a lot of it depends on several things. One, how good were the EMTs and the paramedics that got there? How fast did they get them to the hospital? It's one of the things that police officers can't control.
Okay, let me ask you something real quick.
Real quick, and then we'll wrap it up.
Real shots were fired.
So the state takes over, and the number of police officers is going to increase, and crime will go down faster if the state takes over.
I didn't say that.
Well, okay, so what is the argument? Why should they
The
take
argument
over?
is because the police officers who are doing the job, both major organizations, said we want to work for the state, not for the city.
Okay, all right.
If you trust the police officers, that's the way to go.
Yeah, well, they could pick the mayor.
yeah.
They should
I'm
just
with-
pick the board of aldermen. They should just pick everything.
Well, a lot of them have worked under both state control and local control.
That's right.
And prefer state control.
All right.
Bill, I want to ask you, speaking of people who have their eye on things, or do they, Bethany Williams is the head of streets. And last week, I guess it was either during our show or just after it, an email was sent out by the city, basically to the press, saying that she, Bethany Williams, hadn't really seen the streets. She had relied on the testimony of her workers to know if the streets were plowed or salted. And then she admitted, you know what, it wasn't until Thursday afternoon that I got out and I saw that the rank and file were telling me mistruths. They were lying about how well the side streets were being plowed and salted. It was a situation where the mayor actually gave the city a B- when it came to snow removal last week. But given that she wasn't precisely on top of each and every highway and byway in the city, should she be thrown out?
Well, not for that reason. I mean, I looked at that as a weather event and a storm and ice that no street director could do too much about. But when you're reduced to blaming your staff and saying, people lie to me, nobody gives me the straight scoop, that's not a good look. No. You want somebody who might say, hey, we didn't do a good job on this, or we'll do better or something. But the idea of people aren't truthful to me. I'm easily fooled. If I was the mayor, I'd go, I don't want that.
I sort of agree with Bill, but I'll even go further. I do believe that you should have been out and driven most every street. If you were the street director during this kind of storm, it would seem to me, if I were the street director, I would call down to the main garage and go, get the best four-wheel drive we have, come pick me up at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I would make sure every television station, every radio station, and every newspaper had a photo of me in the truck touring the streets.
That's right.
The idea that you had to rely on apparently dishonest employees to tell you what the streets look like. I'm not asking you to shovel the streets. Right. I'm not asking you to spread salt, but you have got to be out there with the troops and stand around for a good photo op. But the idea to come back and go, well, I didn't leave my house. It sounded like I didn't go out for 10 days, but my employees were lying to me.
And
that's just bad on all levels.
Still ice out there.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there is still ice out there. This is such a leadership. This is a joke to throw your employees under the bus that can't drive down the street.
All right, and let's harken back to Monday morning. After it all stopped. And the first time we all opened our front door, which I had to I couldn't even get out of my own house at first, okay? And the second I looked out there, I said whoa, this is bad. Yeah. So you didn't even have to leave your house basically to know whoa, we got an event here. We got to get on this. Now, in the city of St. Louis, you already know that they don't plow the secondary streets. So thus, if you're in charge of snow removal, you gotta know that the secondary streets are going to just be a nightmare, and it's just horrible. I have to do something. I have to take action. Like you said, I have to be out here. It was just almost like
You're
the
the
weather.
streets- You're the streets
right? It's
director.
like the weather's so bad as the streets director, I can't do my job. Like, wait.
In her initial press conference, she was talking about how, we had putting people on overtime. We're back to regular shifts now. And he was going, it's worse than it was.
Right. Well, and can you imagine if it had been, let's say, 6 blocks of the city was on fire? And the fire chief said, well, I wasn't personally there, but my people told me it was
they
really
were
bad.
I gotta be honest
you
with
got to
you.
show up at the scene. You got to show up at the scene.
St. Louis is a lot of geography. I kind of feel for this woman because, if
don't
her
live on those
employees were
streets.
lying
That's
to her,
why.
I put it on the employees.
You didn't even have to, Charlie, this is my problem. You didn't have to go down every street. You could have did a circle or got on the highway and got off at either Jefferson, Vanderbilt, any one of them.
Okay.
You
and
gotta
made a
show up.
square
You
and
gotta
know
show
that,
up.
Look at
okay,
you drive.
all hands
Okay.
on deck.
Yeah,
Well,
this is not Mensa.
As if it couldn't have gotten crazier, Joe, you had a piece this week taking a look at Kelli Dunaway, who is a former member of the St. Louis County Council. Maybe you could explain that. She now has a website called Legal Witchcraft, where, among other things, she'll help customize spells and rituals for people. A spell. It kind of seems to me that this is a kind of a sign of how crazy St. Louis really is.
I just figured it was just a job after politics. And, and there's certainly, I make no judgment whatsoever. I just thought it was an interesting story. There's a lot of people who get out of office and become a lawyer.
You know what? I make a judgment. I think this shows that we need more businessmen and women in positions of power. People who've
She's
met a
in business.
payroll. Well, she was a lawyer who now is helping people cast spells, okay?
Okay.
And it just shows the lack of
look,
Charlie, I'm old enough to know that you don't make fun of people who can cast spells.
That's a good
I mean,
point.
you
That's
really
a good
don't.
point.
If she says she can cast spells, okay.
And it's, what, for me, it's a win-win because now I know exactly where to get my broom service.
Well,
Right?
Wait, money is money, y'all. I mean, like,
That's
wait a minute.
right.
If somebody comes and says, Alvin, seriously, if you invest $10,000 in the witchcraft business, you'll make $100 over the next 12 months. Well, we would say, like, you know what? As crazy as this sounds, this is in now, and it is in.
That's right.
This is coming from the guy who denies Nelly the ability to put some put some food on the table.
Conceptually, I'm just saying that, look, if she's in it for the, it's a business.
It
We
is a
had a
business.
bi-state
Serious.
director, Larry Salsi, who once said
Who was
St.
a
Louis
jerk.
is full of bunch of clowns. That's what he said.
And he was the biggest clown
That's-
of all.
Well, I don't
That's-
know if he was,
He was.
because
That's a
there's
good
a lot of
one.
competition for that honor,
Once
including
upon a
the
time-
new junior senator from the state of Missouri, Eric Schmitt, who had a sign at a hearing for the defense secretary,
Right.
and he misspelled in big letters military. He forgot the I. Now, I know there's no I in team, but there is in Reid. And so he spells it military. And as opposed to taking down the sign, there he is talking in front of millions during this important defense secretary nomination hearing, and he doesn't pull the sign down.
The mayor of Philadelphia misspelled eagles while she was bringing the crowds to a charge. She misspelled eagles. My father was one of the most brilliant men I ever knew in my life. He worked for the Department of Defense. He was one of the first systems analysts. He put programs together before people knew what programming computers was all about. He spelled giraffe, Jeraph. A lot of people are human, Charlie. I think you will find if you look into that.
I'm glad that someone from the radio business, you, Wendy, understands how typos can happen.
Yes.
We print people know that sometimes things just
Stuff
happen.
happens.
And you make a misspelling, So for those who didn't have to worry about it, like on radio.
And with no copy desk anymore.
Absolutely.
And what was he going to do? What was he going to do? When
Take it
he
down.
noticed in the middle of the hearing,
Yes,
he was going to
yes.
As soon as we get a break,
or at
take it
least
down.
I think this also speaks to the the support staff that they have maybe on Capitol Hill.
I think you need to take that down because
Okay.
are you so assured of yourself and your administration that I got military misspelled behind me? in this serious meeting of a man who a lot of people think should not hold this position. But it doesn't matter because, I'm with Trump and I'm Schmitt and we're going to, approve this guy. So it doesn't matter that I got military misspelled behind me. It's just it's a big, giant kind of not leap of faith.
Yeah, but and I don't think any of that played into it. I think he probably didn't see the sign and someone's telling him and going, it's misspelled. And he's like, what? Because some aide made a mistake and it got hung up there.
True.
I'm not saying it's a good thing, but man, oh man.
Maybe he could call Kelli Dunaway and with some magic get the spelling corrected.
Or he could call the street director, but they would just lie to him anyway.
That's
so
correct.
It's spelled right.
That's
It's spelled
right.
right.
Yeah, that's right.
By the way,
That's right. That's how it's spelled.
Wendy,
10 seconds.
in Philadelphia, they pronounce it Eggles. Yeah. If you're ever there, they call them the Eggles. Right? I don't know. It's a Philly thing, right?
All right, let's go to the old mailbag and see if we find any typos. Please bring back Donnybrook last call to PBS right after Donnybrook. It makes no sense to lose viewers who can't or don't want to go to YouTube. PBS should maintain access by all. That from Claire Pribula of St. Louis, and we thank Claire. Bill from Rock Hill Hager wrote, during the Ted Drewes discussion, Joe Holleman thought the traffic on Chippewa would be the same today as it was in 1967. In 1967, traffic past Ted Drewes would have been much heavier due to all the cars that now use I-44. Thank you, Bill. Larry Hayes Sr. wrote, I'm worried about Bill. His tie matched last week. Mr. Hayes lives in Wildwood. Thank you. You can write us, care of 9PBS. Don't forget those emails, donnybrook@9pbs.org. On social media, use hashtag DonnybrookSTL. Call the 9 line at 314-512-9094. Listen to us on your favorite podcast source. And don't forget, on the 9PBS YouTube channel, watch Last Call. This week, we'll be talking about the latest with the Rams money. Where is it going? That's what we discuss. We hope you join us for that, and we hope you stay warm and join us next week.
Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9PBS.